welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest has been seen on Homeland, Boardwalk Empire, The Mist. He's been in Split, and now you can see Morgan Spector in the highly anticipated HBO adaptation of the extremely relevant Philip Roth novel, The Plot Against America, which tells the story of a Jewish family in Newark, not a surprise for Philip Roth fans, in an America where Roosevelt has lost the presidency and an anti-Semitic America First populist has won. Sound familiar? Please welcome Morgan Spector. Hey. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Congrats on the show. It's beautiful. It's everything that it should be. The period is beautifully evoked. Your performance feels extremely specific to a person of that period of time in that place. Not that I have personal experience of any kind. Seems like that's what it would be.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Credibility is all we're going for, yeah.
It's David Simon and Ed Burns, who we know from The Wire, from, well, The Deuce was Pelicanos and Simon, but as well as Treme. How did you get involved with the project? What did you know about it?
I think I heard it was happening at some point. You know, maybe there was news about it in the trades. I got involved in it in kind of a weird way, actually. I had auditioned for The Deuce. They had it was a part coming up in, I think, season 2, and I auditioned for it. They called me, my agent called me and said, hey, you've got this part. I was overjoyed. I love Simon, obviously. Then they called me the next day and says, actually, the guy who was going to take it originally, he's going to take it, so you don't get the part. Which never happens, right? It was just clearly.
We'll always get the part. No, I'm kidding.
When they call, no, but when they call you and tell you have it, you know, they don't call you until you have it until you have it.
And you don't lose it until you get on set and blow it or something.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. Until you go to the table, read it, and then get this fucking guy out of here. No, but yeah, he, you know, they were very apologetic. It was a big mistake, a big mess, and David wrote me a nice email and said, hey, you know, nice job in the audition, and we'll see you on the next one. And I kind of filed that away under like, yeah, maybe, you know, who knows. Anyway, they called me out of the blue last year and said, hey, do you want to come do this? And that audition they used to kind of run up the chain.
So you didn't have to audition again for this?
No.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which was crazy, because I mean, I would, you know, like I.
Well, it's crazy because you're also essentially the lead of the show.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, it
was kind of an unbelievable phone call, I have to tell you.
It's an ensemble, but you are. I mean, every ensemble on a TV show still has a sort of a lead that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
And so you didn't have. That's incredible.
It was shocking, absolutely shocking to me.
Were you like, can I audition? Do you want me? We're like, no, okay, great. This is
yeah, I mean, the funny thing is about I mean, I have a mental problem about this, but when you don't audition for a job, which is still rare for me, but sometimes happens, I still spend the first several weeks of work wondering if they're regretting their decision, because you know, when you audition, you know, like, I've made my offer of how I'm going to do this, and you've said, yeah, okay, I get it. And if that process hasn't happened, then you go, okay, then I know they're grinding their teeth somewhere going, wish we could, you know, hire that other guy. Yeah. But
one of the things that I love about your performance, and we were talking about this in the green room a little bit, is that while he's the lead of the show, because of the circumstances of the situation, because of how headstrong he has to be, he's not particularly likable or self-aware a lot of the time. Can you talk about crafting that performance and not having to worry about likability?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a couple of things. I mean, one is that the way he's written, I mean, he's really written as a fully three-dimensional human being with flaws and foibles and strengths, and I think that's a real testament to David Simon and Ed Burns' writing. That's just, you know, that's a well-written human being. But I will also say that one of the ways the story works is that you shift perspectives, and so a lot of the time you're seeing Herman through Bess's eyes. And Zoey Kazan and I sort of really constructed this family together, and I think knowing that, you know, part of what I needed to do in my performance was give Zoey a chance as Bess to see Herman's failures and see Herman's headstrong inability to kind of come to grips with what's going on around him. And that, so in terms of, you know, as we were sort of crafting that relationship, you know, there are times when I know that I need to be fully committed to being wrong so that she can be right, so that she can have that moment of seeing him and understanding what really needs to happen. So it was that interplay also, I think, really helped build
and not representative of that time, but of that time where even though this is a man who loves and respects his wife, he's probably not listening to her as much as a man who loves and respects his wife hopefully is in 2020.
Right, absolutely. No, I think that was something that was, it would have been, completely anachronistic
Yeah.
if the first time she pipes up and says, "Honey, I think you're wrong," he went, "Oh yeah, you're right. Of course, I didn't think of it that way." I mean, he has the privilege, the sort of patriarchal privilege of being able to, shut out her voice for much longer than he really should have, I think. But yeah, it was. Again, that was something we sort of really built together.
And that said, like, he can kind of be as, I don't want to say as dislikable as the creators and you want, but he kind of can be because he is on the right side of this idea of history. What he's headstrong against is something that is horrific.
Yeah, and I think
prejudice. It's anti-Semitism.
Right, but I also think it's something that we've seen before historically. It's this thing of saying, well, yes, I'm Jewish, but I'm American. I belong here. This is my country. I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to run away. And I don't believe that I'll be forced to do those things. And, there were many German Jews who felt the same way, who felt that they were as much German as they were Jewish, and that the country that, they'd flourished in and they'd given so much to was never going to reject them, was never going to turn on them.
I think there were probably plenty of Arab Americans who felt the same way
Absolutely.
in 2001, 2002,
Absolutely.
3, 4, 5,
Yeah,
and so
on
so
to
forth.
the day.
Today,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And then
I mean, Ilhan Omar is like one of our, one of the most courageous politicians in America right now. Is somebody who, I mean, if you ever look in her when she posts something on social media, it's just
vitriol and
absolute hatred that she's receiving day in and day out. But one of the things I think is the most beautiful about her is how much she really tells that sort of immigrant American story about herself, and it's amazing. But it's still going on.
I have to ask, what was it like shooting this show? What was it like on set? Well, I'm sure news from the administration. Were you guys shooting this during Charlottesville, or did it start shooting after that?
No, we were after.
After, okay.
Yeah, we were after. But yes,
That's a particular moment of the the Night of the Living Dead rising up from the ground and kind of.
Yeah, I would say. It was being on set shooting this. It was my sort of normal way of dealing with this administration. I mean, because there's certain thing, it happens. Your side loses an election, and then you kind of have to go, okay, well, the next 4 years, a lot of things are not going to go my way, and you have to kind of deal with that in a certain way. And I tend to deal with it with like a little bit of ironic detachment, and focusing on the next election or the next opportunity to organize or whatever, and.
Trying not to get caught up in the Did you see? Oh
my
God!
I don't want to ride that. I don't want to ride that wave. I think it's you just. Honestly, I feel like you're being strung out by the by the 24-hour cable news network if you let that happen to you. And so I kind of tried to avoid that. And then while we're making this, it just was impossible. So it just felt like everything, I had to sort of be letting everything in. And my paranoia and anxiety level kind of went through the roof. It wasn't that pleasant.
Did you read the book prior to starting to shoot again? I know you had read it right when it came out, right?
Yeah. I went back and when I got cast, I went back and reread the book a couple times and went and also, it was such a, the names are changed. We're the Levins, not the Roths, and there are certainly ways in which Herman Levin differs from Philip Roth's depiction of Herman Roth.
In what way?
I think Herman Roth in the book is even more of a blowhard. It's even more of but he's also. I don't know. He's just more of a kind of emotional roller coaster in the novel a little bit.
I feel like that's so often where film adaptations go wrong with adapting Philip Roth is not recognizing that there are certain things that he can do with his characters in his book that you just can't do in depictions of the characters on screen.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think, Plot Against America is actually one of Roth's least kind of scandalous novels, but there are a couple of really, he obviously goes into the sexual development of this 8-year-old version of himself, which in a novel, you can absolutely tolerate. But I think if we were to put it on screen and you're seeing that, I don't know,
that is in the book.
Yes.
Because it's one of the books that I haven't read of his, but every book of his has the sexual development of the male character, whether it's at 8 years old or at 53 years old in Sabbath Theater, it's there.
Yeah.
But I remember someone reading this at the time and they were like, I love this book. And they went I'm kind of in that Roth chapter where it's just about this kid masturbating a lot.
Right.
Yeah. And I was I was wondering if this was actually going to even
it's not like that. I mean, there's a sequence in the novel where he's riding this bus and he starts sort of wondering about like the sexual proclivities of nuns or something like that, which, you know, it's very Rothian. There's just like a little bit of that. There's some, you know, there's another, like, there's one really graphic scene, but it's, I would say for a Roth novel, it's as minimal as it gets. Yeah.
And I would say that that doesn't necessarily fit with what the show was trying to be about or trying to do.
And it didn't.
It would actually feel very out of place
Totally.
within the context of the tone of this.
There's one little moment in the first episode. There's that where you get a kind of taste of that. You know, where Philip is, Philip's friend takes him to his house and asks him to fondle his mother's.
Oh yeah, right.
You know, it's that. That's about as much of a taste of it.
It's like juvenile. I mean, that's just pretty standard run of the mill.
Right.
Not Rothian.
Not Rothian.
Coming of age material.
Right, exactly.
So when it's you and Zoe Kazan, I mean, generally, and Winona Ryder and John Turturro.
Anthony Boyle.
And what?
Anthony Boyle.
Anthony Boyle. An incredible cast. What was it like working with Zoe?
It was great. I was honestly one of, you know, she called me when I got cast, and she was just so generous and welcoming about it. And
she's just coming off The Deuce as well.
Yeah, she was working on it. I mean, she did an episode or two while we were shooting. So yeah, because David and Nina were doing double duty while we were making this, which it was hard. I mean, just having watched how hard show running of one show is,
especially two period pieces.
Yeah. It was insane to think that they were doing that, but they managed it somehow. I mean, you know, George Pelecanos on The Deuce is also holding it down over there. But yeah, Zoe, you know, Zoe's a writer, and so there was a way.
I loved Wildlife, which
she
co-wrote.
I think that movie is incredible, and I think they worked. You know, they worked very closely on that film, and so there's a real advantage. You know, I haven't done that. I mean, my wife just finished directing her first feature, and so I got to see a little bit more of that. But, you know, there's a way in which if you haven't done those jobs, you haven't been the screenwriter, you haven't been the director, you don't see the process from that vantage point. And so there is that kind of actor's myopia where you're not seeing how maybe the choice that you're making fits into the totality. And Zoe has that real skill because she's a writer. And so, you know, there were times where she could just sort of unlock something in conversation. Yeah, it was a real. She's a hell of an asset to have on set, actually.
Unlock something in conversation. Do you mean that in regards to the scene, how it fits into the context overall, or just sort of? I mean, because there is something that happens, I think, for writers when they get the chance to act, and then they sort of know how the words sound a little bit more when they're writing. And then for actors, I guess, dealing with screen or having written or directed, it's knowing the pressure of maybe what a screenwriter or director is feeling at that time as well.
I don't think it's not as much about knowing the pressure, but just about knowing like how the scene needs to fit into the episode, and so what's actually important about a given scene, and also, I mean, again, just being able to. You know, sometimes the scenes actually are not, you know, Herman will go on and on at length about something, but the scene actually isn't about what he's saying. The scene is about what Bess thinks about what he's saying, right? And so, you know, setting up, knowing that, you know, that dynamic, that sort of old school patriarchy kind of dynamic that, you know, Zoe was very committed to representing a relationship that was from that period. And so, but also exploring, you know, how power actually works in those kinds of relationships, because it's unequal in terms that we recognize today, but also there's an arena in which I think the man cedes power to the woman, and so we were sort of interested in exploring that. Yeah.
Right. It's a relationship of that time, but it's not an abusive relationship.
No, it's a highly functional relationship for the period.
Right.
Yeah.
In order for that to happen, both parties have to feel respected. It's just that respect is represented differently in 1940 than it is in
no, and women of that time, especially Jewish women, I think, you know, like they ran the household. You know, the man was out of the house working in a job, organizing money, but she was doing all the accounting, all of the, you know, I mean, the sheer, I mean, Roth is really good on this in the novel, actually, is that the sort of litany of labor, and without any, you know, every dish washed by hand, every meal made from scratch, every, you know, the laundry done, you know, all by hand. Yeah, I mean, just the sheer amount of work, and I think that there was mutual respect as a result of that. I mean, Herman's out killing himself in the streets, selling life insurance, and she's at home working her fingers to the bone in every respect for the family. So there is that partnership there.
When you get a scene, and you sit down with your scene partner, or maybe it's just you, whatever the scene is, be it a play, be it a TV show, what's your first question?
About the scene?
Yeah.
It's such a good question. I don't. I guess like, what is the scene about? What's happening in the scene? I mean, what is the fundamental action of the scene?
Do you focus on it from a macro level? Like, what is the scene about in regards to the rest of the story, or do you focus it on your character and on what you're going to be doing?
I try to do both. I mean, you're trying to serve the story. You're trying to serve the overall storytelling in it, as much as you're trying to sort of find the truth of your character and connect it up to the every other scene. But yeah, I think you kind of have to do both simultaneously. I mean, I think it's sort of easier to dispense with the question of what does a scene do? What is the function of this scene? Sort of figure that out very quickly, and then the other thing is, okay, what am I doing here, and how do I get as invested as I can in the stakes of that? Yeah.
And why is the character doing this? What are the underlying emotions behind all of this?
Yeah. What's the not only what am I trying to do, but what's in my way? Do I get it? Right? What's the do I get what I want, and if not, why not? And what am I struggling against in order to get it? Yeah.
It's kind of obvious, but I'm always so curious. Like, you ask yourself those questions, you do all this work beforehand, but then when you get to the set, you kind of just hope that that's in you and you embody
absolutely.
it. Because if you even think about any of that stuff, you're not in the moment with the other person that's playing,
Right.
and at that point, you're kind of just improvising and playing and
Right.
trying to see what comes.
Yeah, and I always think of like, I played Little League when I was young. I was never like a very good athlete, but when somebody hits a very hard line drive or ground ball to you, you're at third base or something like that, you really don't have time to think about it. Your body just does it. And if you do have time to think about it, that's when you mess it up, right? Like, your instincts are actually better than you. Right. So I think that's, preserving that state on set is kind of part of the mental challenge of being an actor, is being open and available and not getting in your own way too much. Yeah.
You say your body just does it. You mean get out of the way of the ball,
Yeah,
right?
right. Flee.
Because that's
Absolutely.
what I did. I would just go like that.
Right.
Put that.
Well, that's what you do first.
Right.
I mean, that is, really. And actually, when you watch, I remember this from grad school, when you watch actors who are learning how to act, that's also what they do first. Huh. They duck. They don't want to, like, if somebody, sends like makes an authentic choice, and they have to deal with it, they duck it. They don't want it, they shut down or something like that, because it's actually kind of, you don't know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. It's a little scary to deal with real emotion. And then eventually you learn just like, let it go.
Well, at that point, you then have to figure out what to do with your lines in a place that you were not anticipating.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? You can't just kind of react the way you would a normal person would. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you do when someone makes a big decision that's inauthentic?
Try to believe in it. Huh. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, it's your...
Just keep trying to do your job.
Well, and also, you're an ensemble. You're a team, right? They're your partner. You all have to, I think you'll have to try to make each other look as good as you can. Yeah.
How much research outside of what's in the novel? How much research did you want to do about that period of time? Because as much as it's historical fiction, it is rooted very clearly in actual history with references and pieces of that moment.
Yeah, well, he has an appendix in the back of the novel where he actually goes into Roth does, where he goes into the actual history. And I mean, he's so clever about the ways that he deviates, because he sets up a situation that is really plausible and really rooted in history. I also. This is a very rare luxury, but Roth wrote a whole book about his father, Patrimony, about his father's death, and so he, I had already read it, but I went back and read that again and sort of returned to that over the course of shooting as a resource, just as a way to remind myself who this actual person was. I mean, Roth has, at the end of Patrimony, Roth has this dream about his father, and I'm gonna probably butcher this, but he sees this sort of like this empty, burned out hulk of a warship sort of floating in the harbor, and he somehow in his dream recognizes that's his father, and that sense of somebody who was, for whom life was a battle, that to some extent, this generation, and I recognize it in some of my own family, this sense that yes, you were American, yes, you were assimilated, yes, you belonged, but at the same time, everyday life was something that you engaged in, warily and with an appetite for conflict. It was, so I went back and reread that. I read some sort of history of the period. I also read the Sinclair Lewis novel, It Can't Happen Here. which was a really interesting. I found that really fascinating because that was written in '39, I think.
That was a book I didn't read, but that was a book that was getting passed around a lot leading up to and just after the election in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, and for good reason. But it's really interesting to see. Okay, just post-Depression. Capitalism is discredited, democracy is discredited. There's a real sort of open question: is something else going to rise into the gap? And I think we're in a similar moment, or certainly were in a similar moment. 2016, we had this financial crisis. 2008.
Going by today, I think we may be in a similar moment coming up.
Yes.
Pretty wild day.
Pretty wild day on the old markets.
Yeah. I love Philip Roth. This is super tangential.
Yeah.
Just because you brought up another one of his books. I love Philip Roth so much because he always transcends the idea of what his book is, what he is thought of as a writer, and what his books seem like they're going to be from like the first page. Like the last book I read by him was The Human Stain, and it opens with like a 65, 70-year-old professor leering at his like 30-year-old female janitor, and you're like, okay, come on, man. Like reading that now feels like not just problematic, but like something that it just is unnecessary to read. And then you get 10 pages in, and you're like, oh, he's just like was the greatest writer ever. This is so beautiful and incredible to read, and immediately surpasses this idea of what you think it is. And
He's a genius.
Yeah, he's a genius, and the sort of like surface perversions that feel problematic. It's so much deeper than that.
No, I think he is somebody who is deeply honest about what it is to be a human being, and I think that is in some ways necessarily apolitical. You can't, like, once you're drilling down as deeply as he does, and I really think that's what he does. He just goes down and down and down and down into himself. That's whatever the trends, whatever the prevailing winds are. Sometimes he will be in favor, sometimes he won't. But his work is going to last forever, I think.
Do you feel like as much as there are parallels, and that's one of the reasons I'd imagine why this was made, because it felt like there were parallels to Trump and
Certainly.
Lindbergh and this this fictional idea. Do you feel like they are as exacerbated or as much as we fear? I mean, clearly Lindbergh is shaking hands in this with Hitler.
Yeah.
World War II is raging on. Genocide is being carried out. These people don't know the extent to which the genocide is being carried out,
right.
but they're fairly aware that it's happening. Do you think it's fair that we draw those parallels?
Well, I mean, there's nothing intrinsic to the work that says you must draw those parallels,
Sure.
And yet those parallels are being sort of relentlessly drawn.
As we said, this was written during the Bush administration, though.
Yeah. No, that's true. And in some ways, it's like a found text that happens to reflect our era. I mean, there was a Richard Rorty quote going around right when Trump got elected that was similar. Just this piece that was from like the 90s, when you went, oh my God, this is absolutely prescient. I think. I don't think it's hysterical to make the connection. I mean, I think especially when you see the kind of global, you see Viktor Orban in Hungary, you see Bolsonaro in Brazil, you see, there are certainly a few others that where you see that and there's it's not, there's also right-wing money flowing from America to those administrations, to those presidents, to their projects. There is a kind of right populist, anti-immigrant movement that is global, and that is, given that we are in a moment, like Naomi Klein has pointed out, for instance, where we're looking at climate is going to create many, many more refugees, many tens of millions more refugees, and so it's hard not to see the moment that we're in as kind of anticipating that. These are like Fortress America, Fortress, politics.
I always feel like the mistake we make when we talk about climate refugees is that we often say, or the candidates that I support say, by the end of the century there will be this many, and it's like that is at that moment.
Right.
It will be increasing year by year by
right.
year. Like in 5 years, it will be even more of a catastrophe than it is right now. What do we do then?
Right.
You know?
No, and what do we do about the pressure that will exert on domestic politics?
Yeah.
and on every every political leader around the world, because as you can see with Angela Merkel, she made this massive compassionate choice to welcome 1 million refugees in, and there are many people, fairly or not, that have said that was what sort of led to her the diminished power of her party and her diminished stature. So I don't I wouldn't weigh in on whether that's true or not, but that kind of threat to where you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. We're gonna have to draw some lines about what we stand for, what we believe in, I think.
Yeah, which I think this show tries to do, or tries to, at the very least, pose those conversations, pose those questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love your performance, Morgan. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
The plot Against America starts this weekend at 9 p.m. This coming weekend?
Monday the 16th.
Oh, Monday the 16th. Next Monday, right?
Yeah.
At 9 p.m. HBO. Morgan, thanks so much for being here. Good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, should we do the Corona shake?
Yeah.